We're going to talk more broadly about that with the next guest, Sam Caucci, who is CEO, founder of One Huddle, which is what they call a workforce tech company. We'll get him to explain that a little more. You find him on the X at Sam Caucci, C-A-U-C-C-I. Sam, welcome. Thanks for being here today.
Hey, Tim. Thanks for having me.
What's One Huddle?
Yeah, One Huddle, we turn employee training, development. I'm sure, like all the listeners, have been through their fair share of employee onboarding and, watch the video, take the quiz types of things at their desk. And we have a tech company that takes everything an employee needs to know, and we transform it into mobile games. So employees can learn in a more engaging, more effective, more in the flow of work style for today's workforce.
I'm fascinated about the concept of where we are going as an economy, as an industrial power, whatever you want to characterize it as. You mentioned games. I see all these AI experiments in the American of tomorrow who looks fat and lazy, and the worker of tomorrow who has a certain skill set or not. And I'm kind of curious how you think we're going, what direction we're going in right now, because tariffs are supposed to sort of readjust our economy to getting back to the manufacturing days. There's some skepticism about it. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think our workforce today is changing pretty dramatically. You get 55% of U.S. workers are now Gen Z or millennial. Gen Alpha is now knocking at the door. Gen X and boomers are working later and later than expected. I think that tariffs tariffs plus AI plus this post-COVID moment are creating a cocktail of different challenges for workers today. Workers who are trying to not just acquire the certifications, the credentials, and the skills to win jobs and succeed and build careers, but also workers who are trying to anticipate where the workforce is going. Tariffs have definitely introduced maybe a new cloud over workers, and not necessarily sure where they need to take their careers. We see this today a lot as we talk with workers who there's a lot of confusion or uncertainty around where do they go to position themselves best for the workforce of the future.
There used to be a sense that you could leave your job and you could find something better, and it was depending on the market and the year. When I was growing up, of course, parents, the generation before me, I'm a boomer, so the generation before me was get a job, stay there for 40 years, retire, get a pension, and leave. A little bit different when I was moving through the workforce, but then it just seems a lot of things have changed over time. What is it that these younger workers, Gen Z, et cetera, what are their expectations for the work environments? And I saw this one note, job hugging, and that I'm kind of fascinated about. Talk about the attitudes towards work with this generation behind mine.
I think there's an expectation of investment from this generation. Gone are the days where just getting the job and being trained for the current job is enough. Younger workers today, especially millennial and Gen Z workers, and millennials are moving more and more into management roles in our workforce. There is an expectation of continuous investment and continuous development. And when workers see that investment go into other infrastructure, other technology, other spend, they become not just disgruntled, they become disengaged, and disengaged workers don't perform at the levels that they can. And we tell brands this all the time. Workers, it's not about training, it's about performance with workers today. And when they don't feel like they're seen, they don't feel like they're being invested in. And, the data doesn't support that we have a nation that invests heavily in workforce development. And as organizations cut labor, they cut training costs. And this creates a lot of friction and tension between workers on the front lines and their direct reports.
Sam Caucci, CEO, founder of One Huddle, is with us, and we're talking about the workforce and some broad concerns about that. I don't want to go into medieval history too much, but the guild system at one time meant you become an apprentice, you work for years and years, you finally become a craftsman, and therefore you are now qualified to be the master, if you will. And, to a certain extent, we have had a culture where you've had older people teaching younger people how to do what they need to know, teaching them the ropes, whether it had to do with corporate policies, or it had to do with the politics, or it had to do with the technical skills. Now it seems that has flipped a little bit, because clearly new technologies are advancing so quickly that younger employees often know more than their older coworkers when they get into a job. And I'm guessing that that has an awful lot to do with the changing dynamic of the workforce.
Tim, you're on the money. One of the things that we see at One Huddle with our data, and we're looking at data that's coming directly from the front line, not just around what skills people have, but what skills they're interested in. Because at One Huddle, we transform all of the learning, career development pathwaying a company has into games, which means workers may voluntarily explore skills that are not directly related to their current job. This is gold for an organization. When you see a worker voluntarily wanting to know the next role next to them, when a hostess is learning bartender skills or a bartender is learning manager skills, that is really interesting data. What we see from our frontline reporting is that frontline workers are constantly chattering back to their direct reports around inaccuracies in training information, which means that you have frontline workers, like you're saying, who have a lot of information, who are cross-skilling, and we see a lot of data coming from frontline workers where they're saying to their manager, no, this is not how we make this cocktail. This is actually the way I was trained to do it. Or they'll say, hey, this is a way that we can maybe make this process better or more efficient, which means that workforce training shouldn't be coming trickle down. It could be coming bottom up as well, and that builds stronger organizations. We just need companies to invest in technology that doesn't mute their frontline, but unlocks their ability to communicate.
Sam, much has been made of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I'm wondering how the workforce views that, and maybe it's a generational change. Can you give us some insight into that?
At One Huddle, it's our top 3 game category across all brands is our diversity, equity, and inclusion, culture-related topics. These are course tracks that employees are voluntarily exploring. And by the way, we have not seen as much, over the last year and a half, we've been very impressed and proud of the way organizations have continued to make that training and development content open, free, and available for those within the organization that want to access it. We definitely see the Gen Z millennial category of worker being the most open to those topics, but we really haven't seen any reduction in access in the private sector across organizations. It was something we were watching and very closely at One Huddle to see if brands would be removing that type of content and curating it more tightly, but it hasn't been true. Organizations have continued to make it available and accessible.
Sam, if I'm not mistaken, you're a Florida Atlantic graduate, and I'm kind of wondering, in your business degree, how much of what you learned then you would be throwing out today?
Oh, I think that if I had kept my feet where I was, Tim, I'd be in trouble today. So it's definitely been. We are in a world where continuous development and continuous learning is most critical. I think that and I also am an adjunct professor at Rutgers University in their global graduate sports business program. So I'm also very well aware of the challenges in academia to keep workers up to speed. But for me, the degree that I received was very much a credential, and I think that's the reality for workers today. 1 in 3 Americans have a college degree. That means 2 in 3 don't. They're working every day to try to not just show the skills they have, but to acquire credentials that they can use to prove to employers that they're ready to work. And I'm very fortunate to be in that 1/3 category, but I don't necessarily believe that the information I learned was mission critical to my success to date.
Sam Caucci. Sam, thanks for being on the program today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tim.
Sam Caucci, CEO, founder of One Huddle. And you can find him on the X at Sam Caucci, Caucci. Interesting little...